Hello, and welcome to Chucked and Blessed, where the weird gets wonderful and the woo-woo gets real. I'm your host, Charles Crooks, psychic, teacher, and guide on this deep dive into grounded spirituality. Let's keep it honest, curious, and connected. Here we go. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the very first episode of my brand new podcast, Chucked and Blessed. I am your host, Charles Crooks, or Chuck as the title implies, and we're here to talk about all things spiritual and psychic related. So I actually had no intentions of making a second podcast altogether, as this is project number 2 for myself. I also have Hey Ghost Hey, which focuses on the ghost stories and the paranormal investigations that I do out in beautiful Bellingham, Washington. But I found the more and more that I talked to people, not just about ghost-related things, that there was a really heavy interest in everything, not just ghost-related, but spiritual. And a lot of people have a lot of curiosity into the psychic side of things. And unfortunately, a lot of our sources of how these things are portrayed are a lot from Hollywood and from social media. And I still find that you can have very weird and wonderful things happen, but it's not necessarily in the way that Hollywood makes it out to be. So I think that's kind of my mission with this podcast overall, is that I want to really bring everything spiritual and everything from the psychic realm and present it in a way that's very not just authentic from my own experience, but in a way that I hope that relates to others. Because I think we are having a lot of these experiences on the daily, whether it is spiritual or ghost related, or even psychic related for that matter. I think that we all have this very, very natural ability within us to reach out, to connect to each other, and that we are energetic beings that can honestly communicate with each other on kind of this unspoken level. So really, that's kind of where this podcast has come from. And I wasn't quite sure initially, as I was looking into all these different topics, how I wanted to present them. I thought about doing all sorts of different ways on social media, or maybe doing even just tiny little video clips or something. But all in all, I've settled on podcast, as this is a format that I am familiar with now, and I really enjoy. So this first episode is really just kind of all about my own personal experiences, and really not just this first episode, but the first few that I'm going to release are kind of about my foundations of belief based on my own experiences. And I really think that experience is key when it comes to the world of the psychic or the world of the spiritual, and the powers in the experience, not just hearing about other people's experiences. So I very much encourage you to seek this out on your own, or to look into something further, or to even reach out if you want to have a further discussion. I could talk about this stuff all day long, so by all means, do not hesitate. All right, but on to the main part of the episode, and that's really just kind of my story and what has brought me here. So, originally from Washington State, I grew up Catholic, raised by my family, and I remember being a kid that I really kind of enjoyed the Bible stories and, I don't know, kind of the magical aspects of everything related to Jesus and that whole realm of things. And to me, at first, I think that's just what I saw it was to be, as stories, and just kind of like any other set of fairy tales. But then, of course, as you get older, you start to realize that there's a lot more entwined with religion and the people that run that. And of course, as I got older, I really started to see the hypocrisy of religion and what that meant, of pretty much loving with conditions, even though they preach against it. And so it really started to disillusion myself and kind of break myself from that world, and really started to make me seek whatever else was out there. So when I was, I would say, middle school, high school is kind of when I really started to explore the possibility of other stuff. So, kind of starting with meditation, and that kind of led me into Wicca then, which got me into all sorts of spiritual different topics. And I remember astral projection being one that I had a lot of interest in as well, but we're going to talk about that later episode. And it really kind of put me on the path of just being aware of what's even possibly out there. And so as I went through college, I remember seeing the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And that was really kind of the first step that got me into seeing the greater possibility of worlds, energy, and everything kind of beyond that. And something about that really, really resonated with me and has always stuck with me. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite movies that I love to go back to because it just has a lot of good reminders about who we are and the reality that we do kind of experience in different ways to think about it, but very quantum physics related, I would say. So then from there, probably around the same time in college, I started to get into tarot. I initially saw it done on, well, of course, I'd seen it done many times throughout many different shows and things, but it was watching Charmed. I believe it was season 4, and Paige was doing a reading for Phoebe, and for some reason this time it just kind of hit me, and I was like, I could do that. And so I did. I went up to I was in the middle of nowhere, Ohio at the time for college, and I had to go up near Toledo, which was about a 30-minute drive north. And just to find a tarot deck and a basic guidebook, which was, for me, The Idiot's Guide to Tarot. And it actually ended up being a pretty good book, surprisingly. But that's kind of what put me on the tarot path. And I really had no intention of reading for others. It was just kind of more so fun to try and something to get into. So jumping forward to 2009, I moved to Bellingham to be out in the Pacific Northwest, closer to family, and just kind of get out of the Midwest. It had been quite a few years, and as much as I had enjoyed the Chicago area, I was ready for a change and ready for something else. So packed up the car, drove out here kind of aimlessly, really had no plans or direction what I was going to do. And really, I only intended to stay in Bellingham for about 2 to 3 years. Then I thought I would kind of move on to Seattle or possibly Portland. But now that it's 2025, I just hit my 15-year anniversary here and could not imagine being anywhere else, honestly, at least in the U.S. for now. And so one of the very first things that I did as I tried to meet people was I joined a tarot group. And so I got to meet some people in the community, and that kind of gave me more encouragement to start reading for others. And so I started to read really professionally for the first time for the Good Time Girls tours. They are the local history tours here in town. And funny enough, they're the ones that actually got me to start the ghost tours a few years ago. And the two original ladies that started it, Sarah and Marissa, they would let me do tarot readings after their fall tours or some of their special events. And so at that time, as a brand new baby reader, I remember I would do only $5 to $10 readings at the time. And for me, that was big deal, and I'd try to get through as many readings as I could. And sometimes it'd be really, really profitable. But I really firmly believe that if you are a reader, you have to start somewhere, and there's nothing wrong with starting and just trying to gain as much experience as possible, because really that is how you're going to learn, just by doing readings over and over and over. But then also in Bellingham, I had the very fortunate pleasure of being able to go to Simply Spirit Reading and Healing Center, where I did pretty much all of my clairvoyant training work. So the way I kind of see clairvoyance is, I'm going to compare it to tarot. So when you read tarot, you have an image on that card, and you can then interpret where either the placement of that card, where it comes up, or whatever attachment or meaning you attach to the placement of that card. For example, you could put it on the left, that could be no, or what to let go of. You could put it on the right side, and that could be where to focus on. So something like that. But with tarot, you still have an image directly there on the card that you can interpret. So with clairvoyance, I'm basically doing the same thing in my mind, just without the tarot deck. So I'm waiting for images to come up in my mind that I kind of see with my mind's eye. It's all an internal procedure that I have going on. Like I'm not having hallucinations or anything like that. So it's really just kind of seeing with your own mind's eye to get images and symbols, and then you can interpret that the same way that you would read a tarot card. So it was something that I had always wanted to pursue for myself and always kind of wanted to get into deeper, at least trying to expand that psychic part of myself, because I'd always kind of felt too that when I would do tarot readings, that I was tapping into something a little bit more at times. And I'll talk more on that when I do my tarot episode in a few weeks. So I took as many classes at Simply Spirit as I could. I believe I did an 8-week clairvoyance intro. Then I went through a year-long training program. And after that, I went through another 6-month apprentice program. And there was one more 6-month program after that I was hoping to do. But unfortunately, COVID came around and kind of shut everything down. And so also at that time, I had just gotten my Aura camera a few months before, and I had even signed a lease downtown Bellingham for an office space with a friend that we were going to kind of share together and be able to start operating out of. So I was going to do readings, do Aura photos, offer classes, all of that. But then, as we know what happened in 2020, we signed the lease in January, and then, of course, March rolls around. And that kind of put a stop to everything. And at this point, I would say I was pretty into the spiritual lifestyle for a good while now. I had quite a few friends that were into it, and friends that I worked with. And like we'd always get together, talk about stuff, meditate together, always reflect on stuff together. But for as much as we were doing, I kind of had this deep down inkling or feeling that, or I guess I would say it was more of a frustration in a way, because I felt like as much as I was doing the meditations, as much as I was working with my chakras, as much as I was doing readings for myself or getting readings from other people or doing the energy work, I still wasn't progressing where I wanted to go, or at least where I felt I should be going for that time in life with what I was learning. And so I kind of hit this really big, just spiritual block in a way. And in doing so, everything of what I believe started to kind of crumble around me, because I entertained the idea of what if all of this is nonsense? And what if this is all just a waste of time? And so I really kind of had to sit with that and figure out what I was going to do. I think it's also important to mention, too, that as really the shutdown or the lockdown with COVID as it was happening, and of course everyone didn't know what was going on, if you followed anything spiritual at the time, whether it was on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, any of it, there was a lot of kind of big promise that came from a lot of people that this was a time to go inwards, a time to really go inwards and change. And it's all meant to kind of slough away that the world itself is changing, that all the paradigms are shifting, that everything itself is going through basically this big, massive change of structure. If you know anything about tarot, I always think about it in relation to the Tower card, where you basically have this existing tower that's been built up and it's been struck by lightning, and everything that you know comes crumbling down. And so to me, it kind of had that energy. And so with what people were kind of promising, it felt like there was a really, really big potential time of change, or a lot of good was going to come out of this. But what I found was that people kept promising and nothing really happened. My world kept staying the same. I wasn't having any big spiritual awakenings. I wasn't having any really big aha moments to the universe or to humanity even. And so I, again, just kind of felt like, what's the point? Like, even if all these people are experiencing something I'm not, there's still almost this big kind of false promise that's being given that I don't seem to be a part of, or I don't really seem to be on the same level that all of these other people are. And so that was really frustrating. And I think that just kind of fed into the frustration I was feeling of maybe all this is all nonsense and I should just kind of move on. So before I let myself throw it all away, I told myself to calm down and just take a few breaths and figure out what we know to be true. And so earlier that year, from January to March, I had gone through the coach training certification program with HeartMath Institute. I had come across them, I think, a few different times in documentaries. And I want to say it was the documentary called Heart that I had watched on Gaia, where they had mentioned them, and that was enough to kind of make me look into them again. I think prior to that, I had seen them in the documentary I Am by, I'm completely blanking on his name now. It was the guy that did the Ace Ventura movies. The director of that, he had like his own biking accident, I think, and that kind of put him on this journey of self-discovery and to kind of see what else is out there. But HeartMath was also featured in that documentary. And so it was always kind of in my periphery for quite a few years. But then I had the opportunity when I saw that they had their coaching training program come up. I figured I would just jump at it. And as I went through the training program, there were so many different things that I learned that just kind of brought everything spiritually, or I guess, even on a psychic realm together too, kind of like brought it all together for me. As HeartMath really deals with a lot of the emotional aspect of things and how to work with your emotions and kind of understanding how they affect the body, and how that then affects your heart and brain and your heart's coherence with the rest of the body. It really just made a lot of sense to me. So I thought, okay, with what I know, with what I just learned from HeartMath, why don't I start there and just start with my heart? So I'm going to let go of everything else that I know, let go of all the chakras, energy work, and just start with my heart. And in doing so, it really kind of opened up a deeper world of self that I was not prepared, I think, to really even start approaching. But as I did, I knew there was worth to it, which made me keep pursuing it. And so I think a lot of times, like especially when it comes to spiritual work and growth, there's a lot of talk of leaning into love or just let it go and all these bigger kind of spiritual love concepts. But it's lovely in theory that we could just automatically start loving ourselves. But no one is really taught how to actually practice loving themselves. And so HeartMath was really kind of the first teaching that I had experienced that one not only taught me how valuable it was to be aware of my emotions and to be aware of what I was feeling, but I would say most importantly, it gave me a roadmap of how to go about such. So even if I let go of everything else, I said, okay, I'm going to just focus on my heart. I have this one way that's going to kind of guide me, or at least that I know I can go down, and I'm just going to start there. So at this time, I was working in the cannabis industry of Bellingham. I had been at this one store. I was part of a 3-store chain, and I'd been in this store for about 4 years, and I was pretty unhappy with being there at the time. So I wanted to get out, and I was looking to going to Las Vegas because it was going to be easier to get my teaching certificate down there compared to Washington. And that's a whole another story for another time, but Initially, I'd gone to school when I moved out to Bellingham to be a teacher of Japanese, but I wasn't able to prove my fluency at the level needed. So that basically stopped my licensure process at the time, and I started working in cannabis instead. So I was kind of looking towards Vegas to be another route of licensure just outside of Washington. So as I was working in cannabis, I thought, all right, well, I kind of have a path in mind of where I'm going to go to get me on to the next step, next level. So why don't I just know what I know with HeartMath and just simply practice that? And so I usually work day shift, which had a lot of actual time of selling on the sales floor. And so I started to just practice gratitude. And I would practice gratitude for every guest interaction that I would have, whether it was good, whether it was bad, or just kind of neutral. I would intentionally make myself feel gratitude for every single person that I came in contact with. And of course, there were times that this was not a perfect practice. You would forget, or if you did have that difficult customer, you would kind of let them slip away and then move on to the next person. So it was by no means a perfect practice of like I'm sitting there and being actively grateful every single time. So it was just, I'm going to do my best and see what happens. And so what I noticed in just by being grateful for even just a few days in a row, that not only would I have better guest interactions where I always seem to get the guests that love to talk and have a good time. And I would also get tipped more because of this. And it wasn't because I tried or because I tried to sell specific things. All I really tried was to have a good and genuine interaction. And so there really seemed to be a correlation to that. And I was like, all right, there is something to this. And so as I continued to practice my HeartMath exercises and kind of experiment with them a little bit on my own from what I know from my own psychic teachings and kind of brought them together, I then started to have other things happen. Like I had a promotion come from our support center out of nowhere where they had actually created a position for me. So at the time I was like, oh my God, this is pretty big and something that I wanted more than actually moving to Vegas. So I stopped that plan and continued to work on with the company. And so as I continued to work on this process and grow, I eventually started to kind of have everything else feed back in. So it started with tarot and just getting back to doing readings and just taking the reflective information at a very simple and open level and seeing, okay, if this is what tarot is saying, what happens if I actually apply this information to my life? And every single time that I have in my own experience of taking what the tarot says or trying to take that next step of what it suggests, I see positive result within that. So I was like, okay, so everything kind of started to come back. So tarot first, and then started to get back into meditation more, and then back into the chakras and the energy work. And I really found that it was all beneficial together, but I really, for me at least, I could not focus on one specific way or path. It was a blending of everything that I kind of had to practice all together for myself to see it as this kind of whole picture that made me start to actually feel better and start to see better reflections and manifestations in my life. And I think it's very important to note, though, that I was certainly a person that wanted to meditate my way through growth all the time without having to have the experience of growth. And I mean, I love to meditate. I could sit and meditate all day long about the possibilities of life. But it really kind of hit me that, I mean, you can't just transcend this life, or you can't transcend out of this life. And I think that we are actually here to live this life. We chose this life as spiritual beings to go through it as physical beings, not to transcend out of our physical existence, but I think to fully be here, to exist, to be in it, to participate in it. And as much as I would love to meditate all of my problems away, it just simply does not work that way. And that was kind of a harder lesson to learn, because I feel like, again, a lot of what the social media spirituality out there makes it kind of seem like you just have to do this new tool, you just have to do this new technique, and that's going to be the thing that fixes or changes you. And that's not really the case. You do have to be aware of what's going on within your own self, mentally and emotionally, if you want to make change within yourself. And I'm not going to tell anyone of what that path should look like for them. There's so many different ways that you can work on yourself and work through things. But at some point, you have to be able to look at the harder stuff that's going on within yourself and stop participating with it in the same ways. And of course, my own path, that doesn't mean that just because I've had that realization or that practice of it, that I do things perfectly. Not by any means. I still have to navigate and figure things out all the time on my own, but it becomes a lot easier when you have the things that are the heart practice, or the grounding meditations, or the things that help you connect to your higher self or your guides. And I really found that, again, going back to that social media level, because I think it's so prevalent of what it teaches people, or that people go to that as a primary teacher now, between that and YouTube or pretty much any online source. I feel like spirituality has kind of become very surface level until it really gets practiced. And for me, it wasn't really practiced until I really took it on that deeper emotional level. And that's where I really started to see growth and change. But again, I had to really look at myself in a lot of honest ways and how I was participating with this world, and kind of evaluate that and say, you know what, if this isn't what I want to keep perpetuating, that change is only going to come from me and not from meditating it away. So as much as I would love to meditate our problems away and kind of hole up and listen to Enya for the rest of my life and cry about things, that's just not going to help me move on. And so, I guess, more than anything, kind of like I stated earlier, that I really just want this podcast to be either a new kind of way of thinking about things, if you're not very familiar with any of this stuff, or even just a stepping stone to make you more open, or maybe you're going to find something in here that you can actually try and apply to your life and start to have your own experiences for yourself. So I'm excited for what's to come and what I've got to share with you. So just to give a little idea of what's to come for season 1, I am planning this to be about 12 or 13 episode season totally. And I really kind of have no plans beyond season 1 right now. But if you want more, if there's any topics that you want me to talk about, again, by all means, please reach out. Even if you want to just share your own experiences and stories, I would love to hear. But before we wrap up, there's one other thing I do want to talk about, and that is the title of this episode. As I'm sure you've probably wondered what it has to do with this episode and what I've got going on. So several years ago, in my time here in Bellingham, I was living with a roommate. And at some point, we were just watching TV together, and there was a scene from the show Friday Night Lights that came on where they said the quote, "Clear eyes, full heart, can't lose," I think it was. But of course, it's this big inspirational moment for the show, it seems, and so it seemed to resonate with everyone. But of course, my brain immediately took that and without question goes, "Clear eyes, open butt, can't lose." And it was there without question. And so sometimes when the universe gives us strikes of genius like that, you have to just trust and run with it. So I was in no place to question this great morsel of wisdom from the universe. And so I could not think of a more Chuck way of starting this very personal podcast project other than starting with my own personal power phrase, I should say, of clear eyes, open butt. Alrighty, my friends, that is all I've officially got for you today. I cannot thank you enough for being here and being open to what I've shared with you. You can visit charlescrooks.com to learn more about readings and things that I offer, or you can email me directly at info@charlescrooks.com. That's CHARLESCROOKS.com. So, may you forever be chucked and blessed, and always go into this world with clear eyes and an open butt. So until next time, stay curious, my friends.